And so we're going to be on a series on worship. I'm excited. It's huge. The word worship is monstrous. I mean, it is a big word. Through this series, I have to really listen to God's voice, because you can go 1,000 different ways with worship. So I zoned in, God, what do you want me to start with worship? It's it's so big, I don't even know where to start. And I just heard him say, well, where did the first time someone stopped worshiping start? And I had to think about that, and I thought, well, probably Adam and Eve. But no, before that. So let me ask you this question. What was the one thing, most of you, do you know who Lucifer is? Lucifer, which is, we know him as Satan, the devil. Lucifer was actually originally an angel, one of God's angels. So what was one thing Lucifer could not do? Become a god. But he didn't know that. What's one thing he couldn't do, though, that he could not bring himself to do? Worship. But let's go a little bit past worship. Remember, the only right answer is my answer. But what could he not bring himself to do? No? Ask what, John? Bow down. Wow. He got it. Lucifer actually, and the word Lucifer actually has a bad, when you hear Lucifer, we think of, because of we've been taught, we think of Lucifer. But believe it or not, the name came from, if you study the word, it came from the expression morning star. He was actually a beautiful, beautiful angel. God named him morning star, which means it means right before the sun comes up, that light, that shine, which is called dawn of the morning. That's where his name comes from. So I'm going to read you this little part. This is what a little bit into, God gives us a little glimpse on what happens with him and Lucifer. So if you guys have your Bibles, if you'll turn to Isaiah 14, if not, it'll be on the screen for you. Isaiah 14, verse 12. And this is Isaiah sharing this. This is a little glimpse into, because we don't have a whole lot of history on what happened between God and Lucifer. But we don't need a whole lot of history. We just need to know the biggest mistake he made. That it was the only mistake. And I think you'll be able to pick it up when we read this. We'll start in verse 12. How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star. That's where it's derived. That's where we get Lucifer. Son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth. You who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. This is Lucifer saying this. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. Now that word stars, don't think of it as the things we see in the sky. That word comes from angels. So he's talking about the other angels. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of the sacred mountain. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. He got a little bit too full of himself. He started thinking, why am I worshiping God? I'm pretty amazing. He's like, I'm a big deal. I'm not sure if you know it, but I'm a pretty big deal. And he starts getting really full of himself. And he starts getting that stone cold spine. You know people who have it. We all have it sometimes in our life, where nothing is going to make us bow. This is where Lucifer gets in this, I'm not getting on my face. I could be just as smart. I'm beautiful. He had, in fact, when God cast him down to the earth, he took 1/3 of the angels with him. 1/3. That's how influential this person was, this angel Lucifer. Can you imagine if one of you guys decided to up and leave in a bad way, and you took 1/3 of the church with you, that would make you a really influential person. And so we don't have to be a Christian to be influential. We don't have to love Jesus to be influential. So he was hugely influential, but just in the wrong way. He started going, gosh, I got a little gathering going on. If I left, people would follow me. He started getting puffed up. And then pride killed him, literally. And he was cast out of heaven. And that was the first incident that we see of someone who refused to bow. And so as we talk about worship, I want to, if you'll go into your first point, if you're following along, I want to go over the first point, is everybody has an altar, and every altar has a throne. Everybody has an altar, it's a fact, and every altar has a throne. And so if you're trying to figure out, well, those words altar, I don't really technically have an altar, which is, you sacrifice things on. Obviously, we don't have altars, but we have altars. We have spiritual altars. We have altars that we have put things on. We have put things on a throne. Some of the time, it's yourself who's sitting on the throne. But if you want to know, well, what's on my throne? Because most of us don't know. We're out of touch with what's on our thrones. This is how you can do it. Take a second. This week, take out your bank accounts and trace where most of your money goes. Think about your week and trace where most of your time goes. Think about your energy, where you're spending most of your energy. Think about your loyalty, where your loyalty lies. And so trace those things down the track. And at the end of that, you will find what's on your throne. I know that's hard because it's, for most of us, it's probably not naturally Jesus. Because, see, what the morning star Lucifer has, that you have, that I have, is a free will. We all have a free will. God gave it to us. I don't know why. I mean, he tells us clues, but we all have a free will. And what most of us do with that free will is, it's never really good. If we let our free wills, we will decide that we can do God's job. Actually, we could probably do God's job better than he could do in our lives. I mean, that's just the truth of it. That's what our free will do. It will convince you that you can do God's job better than he can. And you're not going to say it like that. I remember, I don't know if I shared this story before, but Callie was probably, how old was she when she broke her arm? Remember? She was like 8 or 9. She was on the trampoline. And she was just jumping a bunch of kids. We were having a barbecue. And all of a sudden, I hear screaming. And my brother-in-law, CT, had Callie in his arms, who's now 18, but had Callie in his arms. And I hear my sister, she screams, "Kristy, don't look!" And of course, anytime someone tells you that, what's the first thing you do? You look, because that's your free will, right? Someone tells you to do something, you're immediate. It's like, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to do. I looked right up. Plus, it's my kid, So that went out the window, and I looked, and I wish I would have never looked. It was the worst break in the history. It was so horrible. Let me describe this real quickly. So this is her bone right here, whatever this bone's called. Someone smart. What's it called? What is it? Ulna and radius. Okay. So the ulna and radius break, and half of it comes popping out of her skin. So her bone's sticking out of her skin. Well, this no longer has a bone to attach. So the wrist is hanging by her skin, dingling. Like like this. So it's like this with a bone sticking out. Well, the bone tore through her skin, which had blood dripping all over. It was really one of the worst breaks. Even the doctor's like, I haven't seen a break this bad. So I immediately went into panic control mode, because when I am in a crisis mode, there is no one can do it better than me. I don't need your assistance. Move out of the way and I will get it managed and quickly. And so I'm like, get in the car. And so she jumps in the back of the car. She was with you, right, Chad? Yeah, Chad was holding her in the back of the car. I didn't have time for 911. Nobody's got time for 911. They take way too long. So I get in the car and I'm speeding down Del Prado, which is a long road. I'm not going 100 miles an hour. You can ask my husband. Red lights mean nothing to me at this level. So I'm burning through red lights. And then all I hear is her little voice. This is when she was so sweet and innocent. Her little voice goes, I'm getting cold, Mommy. And I just want you to know, if I die, I love you. I was like, woo! I sped even further. I was completely out of control, running through red lights. I'm on the phone with 911, telling the hospital to be ready. I'm not waiting in a line. I'm not waiting in a room. When I pull up, you better have someone there, and I'm going right into a room. So I'm doing all this while I'm on the phone, and I hear God's voice, and God's voice is never like, Kristy. Maybe he can talk to you like that, but most likely it's not an audible voice. It's you know and you know where it's his voice, especially when you spend time with him and you get in his word and you journal and you practice hearing his word. You get it faster. I hear his voice. One of the few times it was so clear, and I hear him say, "Let me know when you need me." I just stopped, because I just knew I could do a better job than God could in that moment, even though I would never have said that. See, what we say is not important. It's what we do. It's what we do in our crisis. It's what we do in our fights. It's what we do when we're corrected. It's what we do in our with our kids, and it's what we do in our jobs. It's how we respond. That's all that matters. And so I felt in that moment that I could do better than God, and I just heard him, let me know if you need. I'm like, oh gosh, yes, I'm sorry. Jesus, take the wheel. And I just got on my face. When I got to the hospital, I started praying. I'm like, God, I'm so sorry. You should have been first. Shouldn't have, even before I made that phone call. I should have included you in this crisis moment. How do we forget God, the most important thing? Because we become confident in our own ability to be gods in our life. And so I'm going to go to the second point, is worship is our heart's response to something we value most. Worship is our heart's response to something we value most. You know, I'm going to go through, I put scriptures because I knew I wouldn't have time to do this. So if you like to go deeper in the word and you want to take some time this week or even over this series, I put a bunch of scriptures. I'm going to go over them real quickly. But I thought it was one of the coolest things. And I've read the Bible for years and years and years. And for some reason, I never had this pointed out to me. I've heard a billion sermons, and I've never heard a sermon on this. So when I was listening to this pastor who did this whole sermon on this, it was so amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. How have I missed that? But there is so many face down bowing moments in the Bible. It's so awesome. It's so awesome. In fact, we're going to go to one, but before we go, I just want to starting in Genesis. And you have these scriptures you can go back and read. We don't have time to go into them all, but Abraham he has this encounter, this awe with the Lord. And it literally says he goes face down. He fell on his face in the Lord's presence. He fell on his face. Moses and Aaron, they have this moment with God. Right before they go into the promised land, they have this encounter with the Lord. It's so powerful. The first thing they do is fell on their face. And then you go to 1 Chronicles 21, David. He made a mistake, and his people were just doing wrong things, and he has this encounter with God, and the first thing he does is he falls on his face. It says he's face down with the Lord. He cries out, he repents. Oh God, I'm so sorry. 1 Samuel 5, 1-5. This is really cool. You should read this story with your kids. The God, I'm not sure how to say it. I think it's Dagon is what I think. Dagon, back up. I'll tell a little bit about this one because it's really cool. You got to read it. So the ark, the Philistines had gotten the ark, which is this. It represented God's power. It was basically, a piece of the Lord, and it was sacred, and it was super, super important. Well, they throw it in this temple next to this other god called Dagon, and they leave it there. I think, Well, they come in the next day, and the god, this big, huge statue, fell face down in front of the ark. They're like, that's weird. So they get a bunch of guys, they stand it back up, and like, oh, how in the world that happened, but whatever. You go back the next night, same thing happens. They come back in, but this time, Dagon lost his face, his arms broke off, his legs, he shattered. Boom, in the presence of God, in front of the ark. It's such a cool story. You have to read it. It would be, if you had a God who kept falling down and now he's breaking parts, I think it's time to find a new one, right? That would be my take. And then Leviticus 9:24, God's people, they have this encounter with the Lord and they shout for joy and then fall on their face down. And then if you go with me, this is where I want to read this together in Matthew, if you'll turn to Matthew. This is going to be, I don't know if I gave it to you, Roy. Matthew 17. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John in the New Testament. All right. So, verse 17, we'll start in 1. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up on a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah, talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Verse 5, while he was still speaking, a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from the cloud said, this is my son whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and he touched them, and he said, get up and do not be afraid. And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. See, this is what I wanted to start with in our journey to discover at the heart of worship. Discover what worship's supposed to mean in our lives. Is I wanted to get this point down is that these are some of the most amazing great men. These are tough dudes. These are warriors. These guys are the real deal. But you know what? They found themselves face down in front of the Lord. Because when you really encounter God, when you really taste his presence, when you get past yourself, get past our pride, get past everything we think things should be, and we really get in tune with the Father, because of his wonder, because of his awe, because of his amazingness, man, it better bend your spinal cord down. When's the last time something has made you bow? When's the last time you bowed at something? We don't have a culture, other people, they have a culture where bowing is part of their culture. We don't have that. We're Americans. We don't bow to nobody. But in that becomes this self-righteous, self-confidence crap that we have. But we have to be able to get to a place as it, for some reason, it's a lot harder for you guys, because there's something you take bowing as a sign of like submission, as a sign of weakness, and you've got to let God rewire your thinking on that process. Women, it's a little bit easier for us, but we still don't do a great job at it. It's easy for us, so we should be doing it more often, but if we're honest, we don't. When's the last time you were on your face with the Lord? In your bathroom, in your bedroom, with a worship song, wherever? When's the last time you got on your face because of how awesome God is? For me, I was convicted. It's been a long time. Every once in a while, I'll hear God's voice, get on your face, or get on your knees, which is the same thing. Get on your knees during worship. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. Oh, I'm going to look so weird. Everyone's going to be like, what's going on? But, you go through all those thoughts in your head, and it's like, what do I care about anybody's opinion besides God's? Why do we care? I don't know. It's a brokenness in us. Here's your third point, is when you bow face down to the Lord, he will always stand you up. He will always. The thing, when all these guys fell face down, when they all fell face down, they weren't left there. They weren't left there. If you read their stories, it goes on. They go on to do amazing, great things with the Lord. Because when you get on your face, when you get on your knees with the Lord, he loves it. It literally jacks his heart up to stand you up. He loves to give you strength to stand up, to say, that's my kiddo, just like Jesus taps him on the shoulder in this story. And let's read it again. When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. And that word terrified wasn't like we think of terrified. We watch a horror movie, or, we're in the dark and someone jumps out and scares us. It's not like this is terrified from the wonder and greatness and powerfulness of the Lord. That's what this word terrified. It was beyond their understanding. When something is beyond our intellectual understanding, it can be scary for us. And let me help you. God is way, way beyond your little pea brain. As smart as you think you are. He's way beyond that. So we should this word terrified is not a bad word. It's a reverence. They're terrified and they go face down. But Jesus came. He touched them and said, get up and don't be afraid. And when they looked up, where were their eyes on? Who did they only see? Jesus. So when you bow face down, I hope we'll start doing it more often. Start getting out of your comfort zone. And the Vineyard, one of our slogans is, we don't just talk about it, we act about it. That's not actually what I'm trying to say. Anybody remember the slogan? Come on. We don't just talk about it, doing the stuff. Gosh, my mind went blank. We don't just talk about it, we do the stuff. We don't just talk about it, we do the stuff. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Yeah, we're going to do something crazy this morning. We're going to do something crazy. But it shouldn't be crazy. It really shouldn't be crazy. It's just going to be out of your comfort zone. And yeah, I'm actually telling you to do something. So you're going to immediately want to go, I ain't doing it. You just told me to do it. I'm definitely not doing it now. No, I'm kidding. You don't have to do it, okay? Everyone will just judge you. Just kidding. Just kidding. No, so this is what we're going to do. Because there will come a day, it says there's several places in the Bible, but in Romans, which they take it from Isaiah, Jesus tells us, there's going to be a day coming. Every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. It's coming. The day will come. You will not have an option. Your stiff spinal cord will snap in half. Boom. That's what I say. I feel like it's going to be like that. It's just going to be like people, especially like people who just have never bowed their life, they have no relationship with the Lord. They're just, boom. I think it's going to be so cool to watch. Just like snapping people's back, just boom, boom. He says every knee will bow. Every tongue will confess. You will have no option. So let's get practicing, okay? Let's get practicing, because when you bow, when that time comes, he says it's coming, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. You don't want to bow out of shame. I think that's how we're going to be able to tell people's that backs crack in half. They probably never submitted to God. They probably never got on their face in wonder and awe and how amazing he is. And now they're going to do it, and it's going to be out of shame. It's going to be like, oh my gosh, how did I think this world was about me? So I want to get to that day and go, I'm bowing. I've been bowing. I'm bowing. I'll bow for the rest of my life, because that's how good you are. Less of us, more of him. Less of us, more of him. Like they sang in that song. Less of me, more of him. Less of me, more of him.